are some of your earliest memories of that time? Your childhood?
Well, you know, from where I am now, I don't spend much time thinking about my childhood because for years I thought had an unhappy childhood.
Really?
Because both of my parents died when I was young.
Oh,
First my father
uh-huh.
when I was 3, and then my mother. So I felt that I had been deserted.
Mm-hmm.
And
how old were you when your mother died?
I was 12.
12, okay.
And so that really marked my early life. And I had a lot of resentment and inner anger that I didn't know even I had about that.
Who brought you up then? Who became your parents?
Well, I had a stepfather, and I don't want to go into my whole history. What I want to say is, at this period of my life, I feel like I had a wonderful childhood. It took me about 50 years or so to get over the feeling of being an orphan and being very inward and feeling unloved and uncared for and all that, which none of that was true.
Well, that was my next question.
That was what
right.
my mind, what my mind created for myself. And now I feel like I had a wonderful childhood. I grew up without electricity and running water, and I lived really in a more remote place. And I feel that it was a gift. It was a gift to have had that experience, which very few people have had.
Oh, absolutely.
And we might be going back to it. But,
yes.
You know, I'm not afraid of the dark, and I just grew up in a way that was so down to earth. It was so close to the earth because of how it was. And of course, when as I grew up and saw that other people did different things, and when I traveled to other places, I thought that I had a deprived childhood. But now I think, and I know that I was loved.
Yeah, now you see the perfection in it.
Yes, now I see that it was exactly what I needed. That it gives me a grounding.
That's funny how your perspective changed over time.
Yes.
You know, and why do you think that is?
I think it's because I have a better understanding of how the world works and how people work. I mean, how human nature is.
Right.
Plus, which I had a lot of, I had the great fortune to be able to have many teachers and travel to many places and reflect on all of those things and see how it's an old story about children and their childhoods, and whether they thought they were happy or sad. A lot of it was just part of the makeup of that child.
Right. And then that can color your whole life.
It can color your whole life, and it still is something that I work with. My feelings of judgment about how things should be, and it's like now that I'm this age, I feel like I'm in a school. I've been in many different schools depending on where I lived and who my companions were. When I had my 40th birthday, I thought that I had finished my life in a way. I thought, I've had a good life, and I had had a good life. I saw that I couldn't run with my kids anymore. They were 9 and 11, and I couldn't run with them. And I saw that I had some wrinkles. I was 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, I've done everything, you know. I wanted something more. And so I said, now we got into the civil rights era time. And, you know, very hard times. And I decided, and my son was going to kindergarten there, and the schools were kind of overcrowded where we were.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we both decided that we should move into an area where white people were moving out and black people were moving in.
Really?
And so we did. We moved to
Wow.
a part in Denver where that was happening. It was a beautiful old section, the old beautiful houses, and we found our dream house there. And we had a black family living next door to us.
Mm-hmm.
And just then, 1965, I guess I was 42, the Lady Bird Johnson announced that, you know, Lyndon Johnson said, we're going to have a war on poverty. We are going to get rid of the poverty in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we're going to do, Lady Bird Johnson says, we are going to take the children and start the children preschool and have them educated so we can have them learn. And I thought I was always interested in education, and I thought, what a wonderful opportunity. So I had a friend who was an early childhood educator. I was an educator too, but I had never really done the early childhood. I'd done like 4th, 5th, or 6th grades.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got together and we made proposal to the government to start a program in our neighborhood.
Wow.
And it was in a black church that was in our neighborhood, and it was in the basement of this black church. So we had 60 kids, and first I was on the board, but then I became the director, and so I did the whole program. I mean, I did what a CEO would do on a very limited scale,
Right.
you know. Hire the teachers, get the buses, get the playground equipment, get the, you know, the materials, all the dreams we had about how we were going to eliminate poverty and everything. Now we're back.
Right, right.
Because of all the things that have happened since then. But that was a very exciting time, and it was a very dangerous time.
Mm-hmm.
We lived right in the area where we were, you know, there were cars that were blown up, and people, when Martin Luther King was killed, and Kennedy was killed, and Bobby Kennedy was killed. It was a really scary time. And when we moved to Boulder, then it was a whole different period in my life, because then I got into my art and my dance, and I got this other side of myself, which was the part that wanted, instead of having to be in meetings and office things and having an office and having a secretary and all that
Right.
stuff,
The inner child.
Yeah, I came out and I became I met a shaman from New Mexico who taught me how to drum, and she also taught me, she showed me that I had a victim mentality
Really?
from my childhood.
Oh,
You know, I'm a victim. My parents died.
Uh-huh.
And that was carried into my life, that and my personality was feeling like a victim. In spite of all the things that I was doing and everything else, there was still that part that came out.
That's kind of amazing that she could see that. How do you think you were expressing that victim?
Well, I was I was being I was being immature and smart assy and stuff, and she was very strict, and she saw it, and she called it. And I didn't like to hear that, but the more I thought about it, the more I saw how it manifested in my life. So there, a lot of the things that I've known from my childhood patterns, I still work on today, but I know what they are. When I was 50, I think I was living as most of us did in those times, thinking we were a solid person, that everything was set in life. Everything was the way it was, and it was rigid. It was rigid. We were always trying to be something. Always trying to get someplace where we would be acknowledged and seen as this thing that we were trying to get to. You know?
An achiever.
And also just, there was just a rigidity in the whole thing. And there's a rigidity in the world right now, in all of the institutions. It's
Really?
this rigidity that things are set this way and they work this way and you can't change them. But what happened was, and this is fairly recent, that quantum physics and physics in itself came into the picture, which began to show us that we are not a solid thing. Nobody is a solid thing. Everything is in motion. The whole universe is in motion, constant motion, motion, constant motion, and we are part of it. And this is, and we are evolving. So this is was something new in my life, and it's more and more every day.
And when did you become aware of that? The quantum physics
Well, I
ideas?
think one of the things that I think maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, my friend and teacher here, John Yates, said to me, "There's no I, me, or mine." And I sort of knew that, but I hadn't really thought about it. And then I started looking at reading this book by a woman who had this experience of seeing that she was not who she thought she was, that she was not this little I, but that she was this gigantic being. And that is a concept that I'm still working with, because I haven't had a real experience of it. I've only had little bits and pieces of that. But it makes a huge difference on how you see the world, or how you see other people, how you see yourself.
Right.
Is when you see everything is in motion all the time. Then, looking at my past, say, that was never, the teacher, the wife, the whatever. It wasn't those little stiff roles. I did this, I was that, and so forth. It's nothing now because they disappeared, because they were changing all the time. They were always moving as they are now. So now I'm not this 93-year-old woman. I am a moving, living.
You're always becoming.
I'm always becoming. And I get, when I get stuck is when I think, oh, I should look this way or be this way because I'm 93 years old and I should have a certain attitude and I should be an example, and you know,
That's a horrible thought.
well, it happens, you know.
It does happen. A lot of people get trapped in that.
Well, and I think everybody gets trapped in it. I mean, everybody cares about what other people think about them, or most people do. I mean, they can say I don't, but we like to be liked. We want
we're
to
all
be
seeking
loved.
love.
We
Right.
all want to be loved, and we don't understand how that works because it's so hard for us to really open our hearts completely. We're working on it all the time. We're working, trying, doing things, and it's happening. It's happening. You know, I love going down to Sunsites on Friday morning and hugging everybody and seeing all that feeling that people have.
Right. Yeah, it's wonderful.
And so I feel like I'm surrounded with light beings.
Yeah, I think the 60s helped birth some of that. It loosened us all up, don't you think?
They did. They did. The 60s, yes, and that's what happened to me. I was like really a middle-class housewife in Denver. You know, I wore white gloves sometimes, and I wore a girdle and all that stuff.
Really? You wore a girdle?
Really.
Oh, God bless you.
I mean, I was 40 years old.
Oh, yeah.
50 years old, 40 years old. I was in my 40s. And somebody said, oh, at City Park, what's his name that started the drug revolution?
Timothy O'Leary?
Timothy Leary is talking in Central Park, City Park. It was right behind our house.
Did you go?
And so I went, yes.
Oh.
And I saw all these women in flowing skirts and barefoot dancing in the grass, and he was talking and said, you know, be here now, and it was called a love-in.
Right.
And my eyes opened. I thought, wow. Wow, this is what I want. And see, I was 50 years old, or 40-some, and I became a hippie. But when I moved to Boulder, that was when I really was exposed to some wonderful things that Naropa was there. I mean,
Naropa is who?
Naropa is a college, like a college, kind of a new age college, and
In Boulder.
Trungpa Rinpoche moved there with all of their Buddhists from the East Coast, and they just really changed this town. And Boulder was very active, you know, it just woke me up. Now I want to talk about my spiritual life because I'd say starting, my mother had two things on the wall that I remember from my childhood. That's all I remember about my childhood in some respects was one of them said, God is love. And the other one said, there's so much good in the best of us, and so much, there's so much bad in the best of us and so much good in the worst of us that it hardly behooves any of us to talk about the rest of us.
Oh, oh, that's wonderful.
I know, and it got engraved in my mind.
Uh-huh.
But then as I got older, after she died, I went and lived with her sister in Minnesota and to go to high school. And so I went to her church, which was a very, very strict church. And I went through all the lessons and everything else, sang in the choir and did all those things. But I found, as I got older, I recognized that everything that I thought was fun was a sin.
Your connection with Buddhism and beginning practices came on kind of in your, if we were to look at your entire life now, in your mid-life.
Yes, yeah, in my midlife.
Uh-huh.
Right. And then it increased and increased and increased, because after I stopped working, I could go to many different teachers. I could go to many different workshops, and wherever I was drawn to go, I would go, and they got better and better. So it was a whole thing, you know, with the dance, the yoga, loosening up the rigid things. And then when the science came in and said
basically
everything is not solid,
Right.
it's not like God made the world and everything is just as it is, and you just and made man and that's the way he is, and you know, all that. Instead of that, it's like, oh, it's continual creation. It's just been going on and it keeps going on, and we don't know where it's going. You know, we're all part of it. We're creating it as we speak.
Right. Consciousness is affecting everything.
Yes, and and we're seeing more and more how interconnected we are. How we're getting to the place where when we have the close friends that we have, we hardly have to talk, because we just show up where we need to show up and be there when we need to be there, if we're open enough to do that, not making too many rigid plans. Everything works.
Did you, were you involved in the harmonic convergence?
Oh, absolutely. It started in Boulder.
It started in Boulder, wow.
1987. Yes.
Right, because that was the beginning of...
That was the beginning of the big changes.
Of the big changes, absolutely.
When I was 50, then that was all the traveling and everything. When I was 60, I was divorced. And that made another big change in my life. And when I finished in Boulder with my dance and art and all, I guess I was about 68 years old, and I had an older friend, and I said, let's go down and to the San Luis Valley and have a little trip, a little camping trip, and try to discover what we should do as elder women, how we should live our lives as elders. So
and you're what age now?
68.
68. Oh, like my age. Right, okay.
And so when we got there, somebody said they're having a fire puja over there. Well, I didn't know what a fire puja was, but I said, I want to see, I want to go. So there, in that San Luis Valley, there are a number of spiritual communities down there. And so we went, and we came in at the end. The fire puja was over, but there was a man talking. We came in at the end, and he was from India. And he said, you need to purify your life, as part of his talk. And then he said, are there any questions? And I said, how does one purify their life? And he motioned for me to come up in front of him, and he said, you lead a simple life, you love God, and you serve. And that's not new words, but the tears just streamed down my face, and I thought, that's it. That's what I needed to hear. And so it ended up, as a result of that, about 2 years later, when I was 70, I was on my way to find where I was supposed to be. I left Boulder in my van and got rid of most of my things and set out, went to California and other places, but I ended up down in Arizona. And then I met these wonderful women, and a whole new life began. 3 of the women and I bought some land together. We built our earth bag homes, solar earth bag homes, and we started a whole new life. For 13 years I lived there, and we had ceremonies, we had a Native American kind of life, and a lot of meditation, and then we heard that there were some Buddhists in the area, and we found that there was a Buddhist group that was doing a 3-year retreat very near us. And so we went over, we knew the owners of the land, met some of them, and went to some of the events that they had, and I decided to follow that path. And so then I became involved for 5 or 6 years with Buddhist studies. And after that, when I was 86 or 87, I saw that I was getting older. It was going to be hard for me to keep my place up by myself, and I needed to be where there were more people around. And I was invited to come to the Cochise Stronghold retreat center, where I live now and have lived here for nearly 7 years. And this has been a great school for me. I've met many people, and my teachers live right here with me, and I am still learning.
Would you call yourself a Buddhist at this point, or?
No, I'm not. I don't believe I'm a Buddhist. I began studying other, like Christian mystics, and I haven't delved much into Islam, but my religion is the universe. I used to sing every morning when the sun was just coming up, 20 years ago. And it's interesting to be back here where I lived. I had such a wonderful time on this land with my land partners, 2 other older women, one from the East Coast, one from the West Coast, and I was from Colorado. So we were here and built our earth bag houses and had many wonderful visitors and ceremonies on this land, where we have a natural medicine wheel of rocks like this. This is the South Rock, and each one of us was the keeper of one of the rocks. And we walked around the whole area when we had our ceremonies. People came to visit us, and it was a time of a wonderful, active life. We are now in a new time, which is exciting. We're creating our new world, and with the internet, we are connecting everybody in the world, and it's taking place in each of us individually. and also all over the world. So I think it's really, really exciting.
Well, there are people that think that this is a catastrophic time because they see all of the, there's terrorism going on in the world. Every other day there's a shooting. It started in the schools, and so what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think it's a big purification for all of us, for the human consciousness, that we're seeing the grosser or less developed parts of ourselves when we're looking at all these things, and we're creating the whole thing out of our own consciousness, our own desire to preserve ourselves, our own desire to be safe and have everything for ourselves and our family. This is sort of built into us from our evolution. But more and more people are opening up to that love is the answer to everything, and that we are all loved, and that we are guided, that we are striving to take into ourselves the knowledge of how divine we really are, and remove these veils of fear and destruction, anger, and all of the negative qualities that we see, that we think is real. We're really creating it in our own minds. If we were in our own total purity, we wouldn't see this a destruction. We would see the other part. But we're still in a dual space, most of us, and so we see the good and the bad and the right and the wrong, which don't really exist, and the time that doesn't really exist.
So in the time that you were here, I take it that you went through personal purification.
Definitely.
And can you tell me a little bit about that and what the end result was? Like, you're saying that you have a different vision when you're purified.
Well, I can't say that I'm purified. I'm still working. I'm still reminding myself every day about the present moment is the perfect time, and that everything is okay, always okay, no matter what. But yes, I had a number of teachings, especially from Native American people, about the earth and the sky, and the uniting of the earth and the sky, and the gratitude to be in a body, to have these experiences through our senses. But the body is just a vehicle for our consciousness to be alive. All we can really know is that we are conscious.
Do you believe that we exist in this body, or is this body a projection? Are we, beyond the body? Are we bigger than this body?
Well, definitely we're bigger than this body. We're huge, multidimensional self in a little tiny form. It's a form that we're in, which is not actually solid. It's energy, but we, because of the way our minds work, we see it as solid, and we see everything as solid when in fact nothing is solid. Everything is in motion. Everything is moving. And
even these rocks you're sitting on.
Even these rocks, they have consciousness too. Everything is consciousness, and everything is what we call God. It's a whole big ball of wax.
What do we do then about the people that aren't getting it, that are really suffering, and how do you contend with that in your spiritual life?
Matter how they appear to me, because if it's someone that isn't very pleasant to my vision, I know that's me looking at myself. We don't like to feel disapproved of. It makes us feel less, and what we need is to feel good.
So people that aren't that are struggling and in conflict and projecting negativity maybe into this world, if you encounter one of them, you see that as a reflection of something within you that needs to be looked at.
Yes.
Because you're saying that if you were completely purified, you would only see their God self.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got all that right. That's pretty deep.
Here's the spiral we made on a fall equinox. Quite a few of us, and rocks were brought from Kochi Stronghold also to make this spiral. And this spiral goes into, when I was doing a Buddhist retreat when I lived over here, I used to come up here and walk this spiral every day as I was saying my mantras.
So what is the significance of the spiral and walking the spiral, and why a spiral?
That's a good question. A spiral, water in this North America, water takes when it goes down the sink, it takes a clockwise direction, and when you're south of the equator, it takes a counterclockwise. It's another one of the dualities. And the spiral is something that goes from out to in, and then goes from in to out. So our outer lives, our everyday kind of lives, when we meditate, we go in. And then when we get up, we go out and into our regular life and hope to be thinking about what we're doing, being present, being mindful about everything we're doing, so that we keep ourselves in some shape. But the spiral is a universal symbol used everywhere. I think anybody gets a feeling about a spiral and I don't really, it doesn't have a meaning in words. It has a meaning in feeling, I think, or understanding.
Right. Well, just some of the things that I know also, like the Milky Way is a spiral.
Yes.
Our universe, and then you take a sunflower, and those are spirals that crisscross, one spiral going one way and one spiral going the other way. So I know it's repeated in life.
And it's when a wind storm comes up, there's a spiral that goes up of dust.
Right.
You see that here in the desert quite often. It's one of the magic, I would say, sacred geometry, parts of sacred geometry. I used to sleep right here. It's such a perfect place. It's totally sheltered. Right. And then that's the east, so the sun would come up in the morning and wake me up. We also saw total, was it a lunar or a solar eclipse? We saw a total eclipse here, starting in the afternoon. Shirley and I came up here and sat here until dark and saw the whole eclipse. It was wonderful. I love this place, I love whirling yellow way. I miss you, rocks and trees, but I love the breeze also. You blow, the winds blow here. But now I'm over in Kochi's stronghold where everything is much more lush. But this was my desert place. This is the place for 13 years where I studied Buddhism and where I went inside into my self and also celebrated with many people. What a wonderful life. I had a wonderful dance teacher who taught me to use my body as it wanted to move, to get every part. When the music would go, I would be able to go into kind of an archetypal place where I could see myself as the Virgin Mary, or as a tart on the street, or as an old man, or anything that came into me to be, I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing to make me more flexible, not only in my body, but as I became flexible in my body, I became more flexible in my mind. And I think that's what we're all doing now, is becoming more flexible as all these changes are taking place. And then we need to be creative to bring out more the new world. The new world.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to do a little dance to the rock here?
Sure.
Would you like me to hold your drum, or?
Yeah, you could.
Well, I'm not really a great drummer.
No, you don't have to play it, but yeah, I would love to dance to the rock. I love you, I love you. Look at that deep blue sky with all the white clouds. They're not moving, but they're showing. When I see the clouds and the sun, my life is full of fun. Oh, I love you, I love you. And I love you too, darling.